Live the truth. Last week we began a new series where we're teaching through the New Testament book of James. Well, today, James begins the passage with these words, pure joy. Pure joy. Have you ever experienced a moment of pure joy? Well, when? I'll share. I was about 10 years old when I received my very first ever four-legged pet. Pure joy. Now, that pet happened to be a guinea pig, so I had another pure joy moment several months later when that same guinea pig kicked the bucket. Didn't have to clean that stinking cage anymore. Pure joy. Or I think in my life, I think of like 1999, 2001, 2004, the birth of my three kids. And I'm not the one who actually had to give birth, so for me, pure joy. Well, James, of all the things he could possibly start with, he starts with this. He starts his letter talking about pure joy. But the source of his joy is not a pet and it's not a child. The source of James's joy that he's talking about here is different. It's this. James chapter 1, verse 2, he says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." Really? Read this and I think, what are you talking about here, James? Right out of the gates, he equates joy with trials. Did any trial make your pure joy list? Not mine. Not even close. I think, well, why in the world does James equate facing trials with the emotion of joy? What does this guy know that we don't? Verse 2. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials." Notice, he says, whenever you face trials, not if you face trials. How many of you were hoping for if? Me, I was hoping for if, but he doesn't say that. What James is telling us here is he's saying trials are going to happen. Problems are going to happen. Heartache, it's inevitable. Don't believe all the social media hype. Lots of studies, lots of research on the effects of social media. One of the large conclusions is that social media creates higher levels of depression. I'll give you a personal example of the truth of that. A few weeks ago, I had a tough week. Stress, anxiety, pain. I was looking forward to the weekend. And you know what my weekend plan was? My weekend plan was this: Netflix. I was looking forward to it, and not just a show. I'm like, I want to binge an entire season. And I did, and I was enjoying that until I pulled out my social media, started scrolling through it, and all of a sudden I realized something different. While I was licking my wounds on the couch, seems like everybody else is climbing a mountain, or running a marathon, or winning a Nobel Peace Prize. I looked at that and I thought, man, I'm a bum. Everybody else's life is amazing. Well, don't believe the social media hype. James is saying everybody has trials. Everybody has problems. James is saying, don't be shocked when life gets hard. He says, I wrote you a letter. I told you this was going to happen. And I wasn't even convinced you were going to read my whole letter, so I put it right there in verse 2. He starts with that. He's saying, it can be tempting for us, like them, to think, if I follow Jesus, bad things will never happen to me. Well, no. Look at this. James 1, verse 2, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials." And when we read that close, we see things like that doesn't even say trial. That says trials, plural. You know, when we survive one trial, it's not like, yay, I made it, I got through, that's done, that's over, all smiles for me. James is saying, no, it's going to be plural. That's what God tells us. That's the way that the things on this earth work. Verse 2, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Well, many kinds. What does that mean? Well, James is recognizing there is a spectrum of trials. They're not all equal. They're not all the same. There are some entry-level trials, like getting stuck in traffic, like catching a cold, like when an appliance breaks, or like, for random example, when your dog barfs on the carpet and you step on it when you get up in the middle of the night, hypothetically. Right? We have kind of low-level trials, but there are different kind of trials. And I imagine that some of you are in some of those heavier type of trials right now. You know, trials that are more graduate level trials. Maybe it's something going on at work or at school. Maybe it's a dynamic that's happening in a relationship. Or maybe it's a health issue. And these things are hard. And these things, well, they hurt. So James says this, verse 2, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Consider it joy. Consider it joy. I read this and I think, really? Really, James? What does that mean? Is that even possible? Here's my experience with this verse in James 1:2. My experience is that some people use this verse incorrectly. Example, my boss is a nightmare. Well, wonderful. Consider it pure joy. No, I don't think that's the point. Well, my relationship is in turmoil. Well, great. Consider it pure joy. No, that's not this. Well, I just got hit by a car. Well, wonderful. Consider it pure joy. At least you didn't get hit by a bus. No, that's not this. That's what we would call over-spiritualization. Avoiding, ignoring difficult things and just over-spiritualizing it. That's not what James is teaching here. Verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Well, what does that mean? What is God saying? Let me clarify that by specifying what God does not mean. James 1:2 does not mean this. Doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. Right? I'm not always supposed to be happy. There's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is based on our circumstance. If you go to work tomorrow and your boss says, hey, I've decided to give you a raise, happy. If you have a test tomorrow and you ace the test, well, happy. If later today my wife comes up to me and says, Mike, you are the best thing that has ever happened to my life, spend the rest of the day watching football while I give you a back rub, happy. That would make me happy. See, happiness, here's what it is. Happiness is an emotion that we experience when things in life go the way that we want them to go. But what happens when they don't? That is where joy comes in. Joy is not dependent upon pleasant circumstances. Hebrews gives us an example of this, specifically about Jesus. Hebrews 12:2 says this, for the joy, there's that word, joy, set before him, he endured the cross. The cross. I can't think of anything less happy than crucifixion. Happiness is based on our circumstances. Joy is based on our trust in God's goodness, regardless of our circumstances. So James says, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials. Consider it joy when you face trials. That doesn't mean we have to be happy about it. I don't like trials, and I think that's okay. Consider it joy when you face trials. It doesn't mean that we have to be happy about it, and it doesn't mean this. It doesn't mean we have to hide the pain. You know, sometimes people say, well, how you doing? And the response, good. Yeah, good. I'm good. A lot of times, that response is a lie. We're not doing good. And if we hide it, here's what happens. It just stays wedged inside us, and we miss an opportunity to connect at a deeper level. Look at this. Psalm 64, verse 1. The author of the psalm says this. He says, "Hear me, my God, as I voice my complaint." He goes on. The entire chapter, this whole psalm, is just a complaint. It's not a praise, it's a complaint. He's just sharing with God what's in his life that's not going very well. Or do you realize in the Bible, there's an entire book of the Bible, the book of Lamentations, where the prophet Jeremiah, he's just venting. He's just getting the emotions that he has inside of him. He's just getting them out. This kind of blunt emotional honesty with God, it's all over the Bible, but only the Bible. Really nowhere else in religion. There's no other religions that approach a God like that. And no other sacred text where they say, oh, you can have that kind of emotional outpouring with the God. No, only in Christianity. Only the God of Christianity invites unfiltered emotional honesty with him. Sharing our emotions with God is a vital part of our spiritual lives. Try it. If that's not a part of your prayer life, I'd invite you to try that. You know, along with me having some requests and having a list of things you pray to God, take some time and share with him. Say, God, here's what's going on in my life. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm experiencing. Just be honest, let that out with him. And here's what we find when we share these things, it doesn't create distance. Rather, it draws us close. Well, consider it joy when you face trials. Doesn't mean that we have to be happy with it. Doesn't mean that we need to hide the pain. And it doesn't mean this, that God has abandoned us. You know, God's not like a father that says, hey, good luck, kids, and then walks out the door. He's not like that. During times of trial, it may feel and seem like God is out of town, but he's not. You are not orphaned. You have not been abandoned. Well, what do we do during times like that? The Bible tells us what we do. In times like that, when life is hard and life hurts, we trust the promises of God. I have a few of them that I just go through in my mind when hard time hits. Here's one of them for me. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. That's a promise. That's meaningful. Or here's another one. Read this one with me. This one's Isaiah 41, verse 10. Join me. It says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Those are promises meant to bring us comfort and meant to bring us peace during difficult times, during trials. Well, consider it joy when you face trials. That doesn't mean be happy about it. That doesn't mean hide the pain. That doesn't mean that God has abandoned you. And it doesn't mean this. It doesn't mean that God is against you. Do you ever feel that? I do. From time to time, I ask questions such as, God, why is this happening? Or God, why are you allowing this? God's not evil. And God doesn't do evil. He's not like the Eastern religions that say, well, God is yin and yang, which means God is good and bad. Well, no, that's not what the Bible teaches us. The Bible teaches us that God is good, only good, always good. Not everything on earth is as God desires. When Jesus came to this earth, we see that there were things that were going on here that brought him to tears. Here's what that tells us. That tells us that God, he's not smiling at everything that's happening in this world. That tells us that God, he's not smiling about everything that's happening in your life, in my life. Evil has entered in. And evil is not from God, it's opposed to God. The Bible has a promise about that. It says, well, he's going to deal with it and he will win. God is not against you. He's for you. The passage continues, verse 2, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because. I'm really glad the because is in there. Because here's what he's saying. He's saying, because he's going to tell us why God doesn't prevent all of the trials in our lives. I'd like to know that. Because that means James is going to give us the reason why. Here it is, verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because, here's his reason, you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Well, that's a nice verse to put on your screensaver, but what does it mean? Let me explain it this way. I'll explain it with this picture. Do you know what Michael Jordan and I have in common? And I'm sure there's a lot of things that are floating in your mind right now, right? All kinds of options. I'll share with you the one I'm thinking. It's this. We both got cut from our high school basketball team. And that's about where the similarities between Michael Jordan and I, that's where they end. That's it. We have very little other in common. But I did. My friends were on the team. I worked hard to make the team. I deeply wanted to be on that team. I got cut. Pain, disappointment, trial. As I look back at that years later, you know what I can see? Growth. Okay. Growth. God used that to shape me in some really deep ways. You know, I didn't see it then, but what I was doing, I was subconsciously basing my identity on athletics. I was subconsciously finding, my value, my personal value on my accomplishments. And when those were taken away, it took me a couple of years to sort things out, but I got there. And I landed on finding my value and finding my identity on and in Him. Recognizing He made me. He made me. And He still loves me. He made me the way that He did. He loves me. See, God, He wasn't at work producing the circumstances I wanted. God was at work producing the me that He wanted. Those are often two different things. Verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. See, the promise that God is making here is not that good things are going to happen to you. It's something much deeper. It's something much more glorious than that. God is promising here in James chapter 1, it's not that good things are going to happen to you, but it's that good things are going to happen in you. That's what he's getting at here. Verse 4, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. See, God's plan isn't just to give you ideal circumstances in life. God's plan is to mature you, to make you more like him. Does anybody want to be more like Jesus? Does anybody want to become spiritually mature? Does anybody want to face trials? Because here's what James is saying in this passage. Those questions are the same. They're the same. They lead to the same thing. See, he's saying God uses, doesn't say God causes, he says God uses trials to make us more like Jesus. Moment of painful honesty here. I understand this passage. I can explain this passage. But when I'm trying to reflect and apply this passage in my own life, I'm not there. I'm not. Here's what I realize when I read this passage in James 1:2. I'm not fully living this one. I can tell you about it. I can teach it to you, but I don't think I've reached that level of spiritual maturity yet. Because here's the deal with me. I don't want trials in my life. You know, I can be thankful after the fact when I look back at them, but I really struggle, and I usually fail to consider them pure joy while I'm still in them. You know, here's the unfiltered truth about me. I know what this passage says. I know what it teaches. I can explain it, but I don't welcome trials. I ask God to take them away. And sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. I'm not as far as James. I'm not to the point of pure joy, but I think I'm getting to the point of faith. Faith that I don't have to be happy when I'm in a trial. Faith that I don't have to hide the pain that I'm experiencing in a trial. Faith that God hasn't abandoned me even though I'm in the midst of a trial. Faith that God is not against me. Faith that when good things aren't happening to me, that God is at work producing good things in me. You know, Jesus is well acquainted with trials. He's very familiar with pain and with suffering. The night before the cross, Jesus was gathered with his disciples. And they were celebrating the Passover meal, and he took a loaf of bread and he said to them, "This is my body." Well, what did he mean by that? He meant this represents me. This was Jesus' way of saying, this is what happened at Christmas. This is God leaving heaven, coming to earth, taking on the flesh, becoming a human. This is God here with us, among us. And Jesus said, "This is my body." And I want you to know something. He said, you guys, you've been around me for 3 years now. You've heard my teachings. Great, I'm glad of that. You've seen my miracles. But before tomorrow, he's like, I want to make absolutely sure you know why I'm here. And so he's saying, this world hurts. He says, I know that. There are trials. I know that. There are heartaches. I know that. Because there's also this thing, besides evil, there's this thing called sin. And it's in the world, and it's in you, and it's in me. We don't have a perfect run through life. And so the Bible teaches us that sin, here's what it does. It's not just randomly breaking a rule. It creates separation. It creates distance between us and God. And God doesn't want that. He doesn't want that distance in our relationship. And so Jesus, he said this is my body. Here's why I came. Here's what I'm going to do. He said, this is my body, and it's broken for you. The cross was the next day. He knew. He chose. Because that's Jesus' way of saying, I've got you. I've got you. I've got you covered. I'm going to pay the price. I'm going to take the penalty. Jesus is saying that in me and through me, you can be forgiven, completely, fully cleansed, redeemed, reconciled, restored, new creations, fresh start, reconnected with God. And he took the cup, and he said, well, this cup is filled with juice. He goes, this reminds us of my blood. He goes, this sacrifice, he knew it's going to hurt. It's going to create pain. But he says it's worth it because you are worth it. And then Jesus ended this little conversation with them this way. He said, we're going to do this again in my kingdom. And that was his way of pointing to the resurrection. That was his way of saying there's going to be another day. There's going to be a better day when these trials and these hardships, when these challenges and these difficulties, when these heartaches, when these sorrows, when evil, when all of that is gone. There's going to be another day. There's going to be that day, his kingdom. So here's what this reminds us of. This reminds us there are trials and there is hope. This reminds us, there is pain and there is also great joy. This reminds us there is crucifixion and there is resurrection. So as you partake in communion today, I invite you to remember who he is. Remember what he has done. And remember what he is still going to do. Come, remember, give him thanks.